Welcome to the Fertility Avenue podcast series. I'm Laura, founder of Fertility Avenue, providing emotional, physical, and well-being support to women who are having a difficult fertility journey. Today's podcast is the first in a series where I'll be talking about how my own fertility journey led me to become a fertility coach and holistic therapist. My mission is to ensure women never feel the way I did. Lonely, scared, overwhelmed, hopeless, just to name a few of the emotions I encountered. I hope you enjoy listening to my story. I'll never forget the words, "This isn't going to be an easy, straightforward process for you." These were the words given to me by my gynecologist back in early 2000. I always knew that falling pregnant naturally wasn't going to be easy, but I had never imagined how difficult it was actually going to be. Now, not wanting to dive too deep into my medical situation, I had polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS. I also had twisted tubes based on various operations I had as a child. Both ovaries were on my right side, again, due to one being moved due to a complication when I was younger. And my uterus was abnormal in shape and covered with scar tissues. So it was going to be a really difficult chances of me falling pregnant naturally with all those medical issues behind me. So after about 6 months to a year of trying to fall pregnant naturally, aided by just a few operations along the way to blast the cysts on my ovaries, being monitored closely, my husband and I were told that our best chance of conceiving was to go down the IVF route. Now, hearing this news came as quite a shock, and as you can imagine, stirred up lots of thoughts and emotions. Was I ever going to fall pregnant? Was I ever going to be a mum? Were we ever going to be parents? What if? What if? Can we afford it? I knew we were going to need some medical help and intervention, but I never really thought or had thought in detail for one moment that we were going to need to go down the IVF route. I decided to tell just my few close family members and my closest few friends, but decided at that time not to tell anyone else as I didn't feel it was their business. And I didn't want people to be asking me all the time how the treatment was going. And we were then recommended to be to a specific clinic. And before we knew it, we had started the IVF process. I'm not going to lie, it was an extremely emotional and stressful time. And it also wasn't helped by the fact that my sister had also fallen pregnant at the same time. And, and other friends as well announcing their pregnancies. Now, don't get me wrong, I was genuinely pleased for them, but this feeling was naturally coupled with a tinge of jealousy too. I also remember feeling very lonely throughout the process. And although I was surrounded by the support from my close friends and family who I told, I knew that they couldn't even begin to understand what I was going through. I mean, how could they possibly? It was an incredibly unique journey, a unique experience. And yes, their well intended care and love and ears were much appreciated. But deep down, even to an extent, my husband's, how could anyone really relate to, unless you've been through it yourself, what it's like to having all those drugs, hormones, injections, blood tests, scans, operations. It was just something that was hard to even understand unless you've been through it. Now, I remember having to navigate time off work, asking my boss. I was a teacher at the time. I had to go and speak to the headmaster, explain the situation, ask for time off from, teaching my class where I had my children who were reliant upon me. and asking for half a day here, half a day there. Going down to the clinic in London was not around the corner trip, and back in and out in an hour. And it was quite a tricky time navigating those work pressures as well, which we're going to look at another episode in the podcast series later on, about how to, be supported in the fertility, with your fertility in the workplace. So, coupled with lots of stress and emotions, we were incredibly lucky. Well, I thought we were anyway, as our first round of IVF was actually successful, which meant that our first child would have been due just a few weeks after my sister's baby. So we had started talking and planning, and how exciting that the cousins would be so close in age. We talked about various other pregnancy related issues and things. Exciting, exciting. However, unfortunately, at the 12-week scan, where we were ready, we had a list of who we were going to tell. We'd even typed out the message. We found out the devastating news that I had miscarried. There was no heartbeat. The baby had self-aborted around about 9 weeks, but I didn't have any symptoms to suggest as such. And we left the clinic, as you can imagine, absolutely devastated. Having gone through all of that, and then to be told that the pregnancy was no longer viable, I needed to then arrange to have the D&C operation. We were back to square one. I can't even begin to describe the emotions this caused. As you can imagine, absolute devastation for both of us. It's been such a terrible journey. Every miscarriage, whether it's early on, later on, whether it's been through natural conception or assisted, it's absolutely devastating. And I wouldn't demean any miscarriage at all. And I'm also a pregnancy loss coach, supporting women who have had a miscarriage, because it actually stirs up lots of trauma and emotions. And talking from my personal point of view here, from my own experience at that time, having a miscarriage was just absolutely devastating, because we'd been through so much to get to that point. And I genuinely believed that was it. I was going to be a mother. My husband was going to be the father. We were going to be adoring, loving parents. And it just wasn't to be. So then we decided to have a few months break, as suggested, and we had a few frozen embryos to use up. Unfortunately, that didn't work. I think I had a cycle that was aborted once because of hyper ovarian stimulation. And then we had another fresh round at the same clinic down in London. But unfortunately, this was without success. I realized and took a step back that a lot of my stress I was experiencing was related to the journey, was related to having to negotiate time off work, and long times off work, because the clinic was so far away. I decided that I would drive there as well. It was just all so incredibly stressful, and I knew how stress had an impact on outcome. So I decided to change clinic. And after doing a lot of research and speaking to various people, we found a fantastic gynecologist in Highgate. No longer there, unfortunately. He's now long gone and since retired. But just knowing that he was more local and I could literally pop out of work and be back within the hour, stroke 2 hours, it just made everything so much more easier for me. During this process, during the few months that I wasn't on treatment, I also did anything and everything I possibly could to help prepare my body, including following diet advice, taking a variety of supplements and vitamins. I even had acupuncture and fertility reflexology. And after literally ploughing everything into it that I possibly could to give myself the best possible chance, finally in 2002, I fell pregnant with a fresh IVF cycle. And this resulted in June 2003 giving birth to our beautiful daughter. And I really, really at that point felt we had finally won the IVF lottery. And my daughter is now 21. Then a couple of years later, rolling on the clock, we decided to try again for another baby. The IVF process restarted. It brought up a lot of memories and triggers, which I needed to deal with myself. But we continued with the same local gynecologist, and we had 3 more fresh cycles and 2 frozen ones. But unfortunately, they were all without success. So at this point, my husband and I decided and agreed to stop trying. It was a huge mental and physical strain on my body and emotional well-being. We weren't sure what the drugs would do to me, the long-term effects. And we just felt, you know what, we've been through a lot. We've got our daughter, and obviously we were absolutely grateful for that. And that's where we're going to stop and just enjoy life as a family of 3. And that would be absolutely beautiful and lovely. Anyway, roll on a year or so later. I think I must have had a dream or something happened to me subconsciously. And I just had this hunch that I wanted to try just one more time, as I really felt strongly that it was going to be successful. Now, yes, my husband wanted another child, absolutely, but he was thinking more about me and what my body was going through and the emotion that was, in play here. And he wasn't convinced we should go through another round of treatment, but I persuaded him. I almost signed a contract, not really, but almost did, to say I promised that this would be the final attempt. However, this time my whole mindset was totally different. I was genuinely more relaxed this time. I didn't put myself under so much pressure. Perhaps because I'd already had one child, and for me, I was happy that if that was going to be or remain the case, then that's absolutely fine. I was also a lot more in tune with my body and mind. I had a much more positive approach to the whole process. I had read about it a lot more information was available. I didn't rush into anything. I again made sure that I looked after my body in terms of the diet, the supplements that I was taking, which are a huge contribution, I believe. Again, I will talk about more of this in another podcast episode. And thank goodness I followed my instinct as the treatment was successful. And 9 months later, I gave birth to our healthy boy. And that was the end of our IVF journey, our fertility journey, and the start of being the family of 4. Now, I remember at the time not having access to, not being offered any kind of emotional support. Obviously, there was the physical support, and I had physical holistic support like the acupuncture and reflexology. And for that, I'm very grateful for. But there was no offer of such a thing as a fertility coach, being able to hear me, for me to share my journey with, for somebody to be my guide by my side if I wanted to have a quick, relaxation technique, or something triggered me, or I was out and heard an announcement, or somebody said one of those insensitive comments. There wasn't anybody I could go to or talk to. Yes, I was offered a counselling session at the clinic. That was more really to check that I was mentally stable and well enough to be able to go through the IVF journey. But there was nobody like me, what I do now. And that's why years later, I decided to retrain. I've been in education all my life. I've been teaching. I'm a dyslexia specialist. But I decided to retrain as a mindset NLP coach hypnotherapist, and EFT practitioner. And I'm now a fertility coach and a pregnancy loss coach, supporting women who are on a difficult fertility journey and giving them that much, much needed emotional support whilst they're traveling through this very lonely, isolating, overwhelming journey. Emotions play a huge part in the process of being able to conceive. And not many people realize the impact that stress can have on our body and how it can actually prevent falling pregnant. Now, you've probably often heard people who've been trying for years, having lots of treatment, maybe even adopting or fostering, and they give up trying. Maybe they go away on holiday or they just give up trying, and boom, they fall pregnant naturally. Well, there's no coincidence. It's because the mind is in a different place. They're not as stressed. They're not so focused on the end goal of falling pregnant. And their body is in a much calmer, more receptive environment for falling pregnant. So that's what I do, supporting women. And the series of podcasts, as this is the launch, is going to be looking at all the various topics related to fertility. And I'll also be inviting some fantastic guest speakers that I've got lined up to talk about aspects of fertility as well. And I really hope that you have enjoyed listening to this first episode. So just wanted to conclude really that my fertility journey was not easy. In fact, I would say it was possibly a living nightmare for me. And if only I had had access to better emotional support, it would have been a completely different experience going through it. So thank you for listening, and I hope you found my story interesting. Please tune in to next week's podcast, and I hope to be able to empower people. People find this interesting. And perhaps, if you know anyone that's struggling to fall pregnant that would need my support, please pass them my way. So I'm Laura, founder of Fertility Avenue, your guide by your side every step of the way. Thank you for listening.